Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 208. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally renowned game designer and author, Ryan M. Danks.
Thank you.
Ryan,
Excited
how you doing?
Good. Yeah. How are you?
Good. So we chatted. I was looking at I still emailed you back in July. I was thinking, and I reached out. I said, Ryan, I want to get you on the show. I want to talk to you about your Fate Core system. The two of the Fate Core games that you put out, that was Jadepunk and Shadowcraft. Mm-hmm. And then I was doing more research and realized you also write some long prose books too that we can talk about a little bit later in the show. You are Renaissance. You're a Renaissance man. You're a man of many talents. You're a man of many interests. And all of them, it seems as though whatever you touch, you become accomplished in. Very, very exciting to talk to you. And I'm sure you're going to have lots of good advice that you might be able to give any fellow game designers or writers out there as well later in the show. But before we jump right into just, asking you some questions about some of your games and some of your work, do you want to give people a little bit of background how you got into game designing and writing?
Sure. I don't want to go too far back. So when I was young, I wanted to be a comic book writer, and which is also the reason I became a martial artist, because I wanted to be Batman. And then I got into graphic design school in my 20s, and I wrote, did some stuff, and I realized I just suck at drawing. I'm not an artist, and I have a good eye for art, but I can't do it. So I took some of my scripts that I was writing for myself for comic books, and one of my teachers said, "This is what you should be doing. You should be writing." So I took a bunch of my comic strips to Comic-Con in 2009, and I was like, I'm gonna get I'm gonna become the next Brian Michael Bendis. So I took my comic scripts and no one would read them. And it was hard to get into the comic world. Now it might be easier. I'm not really sure. I gave up, and I started writing prose, thinking it would be easier to sell a novel. And this was right before Kindle blew up and people were making money on their own. So I submitted a few things. I got a few short stories published, and then that kind of just fell flat. And then I saw people making it big on Kickstarter, and thought, I could do that, but I could do it with gaming. It's been a lifetime love of mine. So I'll do that. And I started writing games. And that was when I was producing it. Ryan Macklin, I talked to him back right after Jadepunk happened. And he was like, "You're astronaut rare with how you came out of nowhere and Jadepunk was successful. That's super rare. Don't let it go to your head." I kind of did. That's why I don't write games at the moment. But yeah, that's how I fell into it, and now I'm making the transition kind of back to it. I took a couple of years off, got a lot to do with business and kind of real world stuff. And now I'm making my trek back into gaming and writing and all of that.
All right, and so when you mentioned that as you wrote Jadepunk, you wrote it based off of a pre-existing gaming system, an open gaming license called Fate Core. Did you decide on the world itself first before the mechanics, or did you discover Fate Core and decide, I want to make a game with this system?
Well, it's funny. I discovered Fate Core playing it. Not even Fate Core. Fate Core hadn't come out yet. I was playing Fate, so the old one.
Okay.
And we had a weekly game going, and we were having a lot of fun with it. And then when I decided to get into gaming or game writing, it was right like in between when I started playing and before I did that. I had this short-lived time where a friend of mine who was on a reality TV show wanted to make a YouTube channel and do some fiction stuff. And so I wrote this screenplay with a co-writer for this fantasy game, and we wanted to do it with where you would like be at the table playing, and then you would transition into the world as the characters. And we kind of go back and forth between the players and then the characters in this fictional world. And we wanted to showcase real game mechanics at the table. So we tried to do Dungeon World, but they were brand new, and for whatever reason they just didn't want to get in on the project. But Evil Hat jumped at it. Fred said, "Yeah, do it." whatever you want, because their gaming license is so easy. And that was at the same time that Fate Core launched. So we couldn't get the financial backing to do the show, and so the production fell apart. But I jumped in and said, this is a really good open gaming license. I'm going to jump in and do this. And then it was, well, okay, what's the game going to be? And then I came up with that in about half an hour. Jadepunk, and not on my own, but my friend and I were talking, and I was just like, I thought, because I was doing this research, and it's really cool to see the different parts of the world and how history lines up. Like what was going on in China while Alexander the Great was doing his thing. Like there's a lot of things that we think are very spread out, but they actually happened at the same time.
Right.
And so I told my friend, what if knights and like wuxia warriors were together? And then we started looking into things and saw that like the TV show Warrior, which was based on Bruce Lee's writings in San Francisco, where you had the axe gangs and all of that. That was at the same time as Western gunslingers and stuff like that. So then I got this idea, well, what if Western gunslingers, like what if they ventured into Hong Kong during like a wuxia era? And they had that. And then that's where Jadepunk came from, and it grew from that. I shot the idea to Jacob Posen, and he was really excited, and then we just started going.
Right. So what were some, as you were writing this, because I think Fate Core came out in 2014, but this came out in 2013.
So Fate Core launched in 2013.
Okay.
The Kickstarter did. Their books might have came out officially in 2014. Okay. I started the production. I think I started the Kickstarter in 2013, but we didn't publish until 2014. But I had access to all the materials because I was an early backer of the Fate Core.
Oh, okay. And so obviously when you look at the system is definitely readers and listeners who are unfamiliar with Fate, check it out. It's a pretty cool open source, very narrative game. It's not as crunchy as you'd expect with rolling the dice, and there's a lot of player interaction in a way. It's almost it's not very game master heavy in that sense. But what were some of the things that, as you made, for instance, Jadepunk, what were some of the things that did you make any rules or tweaks that were unique to Jadepunk that you adapted from the Fate Core rules?
Yeah, I'm a big systems guy. I like to play with them. And so when I made it, a lot of people pick up Jadepunk because of mechanics, which is sad because we put a lot of work into the setting. But a lot of people are like, oh, they like the mechanics. I went to, so one of the primary inspirations for the game once we started getting going was The Man with the Iron Fist, the movie. Because in that, and just like wuxia traditionally, everyone has that special weapon, that special item, or special technique, or something like that that's theirs. And so I wanted to come up with Fate Core didn't really have a really good invention system at that time. Now there's games that do it incredibly well, but back then it wasn't big. So I talked with Mike Olson, who did. It was an old like Victorian era superheroes. And the mechanics that he had to put them together, I thought, this is excellent. This is great. So I hired him to do the asset section, which is what we call it. And it was essentially, we got rid of stunts and made a create your own stunt or item or people like companions and such. And that way you could flesh out what's special about your character because Fate Core is very loose in the mechanics when it comes to creating essentially what's feats in D&D or class abilities. I wanted something a little more specific, a little more structured, because I'm a huge Mutants and Masterminds fan. So I wanted that to be like, can we bring this over? That's really that. And then the scene fractals. I got really heavy into the fractal concept. And so I created the scene fractal where you can run an entire game. You don't have to create individual bad guys. Here's the scene, here's how many hit points the scene has, that kind of thing. And then the players attack the scene, and the villains are just representative of the scene.
Give us an example, like, just like an abbreviated playthrough for those that might not be familiar with that scene fractals. What would that look like?
So I have a book of Shadowcraft here. I don't have Jadepunk. So scene fractals, essentially, Fate Core has this concept of a fractal. So an item has hit points and damage it can deal, and these skills, these things. A person has the same thing. A group of people can have the same thing. So I thought, why can't a scene, essentially an encounter, right? So if you're thinking like D&D terms, if you're going up against 5 orcs, and each one has its own hit points, its own attacks, its own everything, that's cool. But then you have a turn for each one. It drags things down. You kill one or two. The 3 are still left. We've been here for an hour playing. We're bored, right? So instead, the scene has, okay, I'm going to have the scene, the heroes deal X number of damage on average. So we'll say the scene has 40 hit points. And I've got 4 orcs out there. So each one we'll say has 10 hit points, but it's really not important. And I'll get to roll 4 times, which I'll just do all at once when it's my turn, and spread it out. And if someone hits an orc, I can say these orcs are really tough. And as you're hitting them and dealing the damage, they still exist. But when you get them to 0, they run away. Or when you hit 10 hit points, 1 falls, right? But it's building out the encounter essentially as all of the, what you would build as one villain, you build that encounter, and then they just have different manifestations. So if and if someone attacks it in a certain way, cool, you dealt damage. I'll take out a bad guy or not, whatever I want to do, and I can be very flexible at the table.
And it also creates that level of that narrative, and also more of that cinematic aspect instead of just like boom, 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 hitting.
Absolutely, because the villain moves don't matter ultimately. There's some people that did this in D&D recently, and I really enjoyed playing in that vein. It does kind of break D&D a little bit because of the way the mechanics are done. But in Fate, it was perfect. No one could tell that you were doing it different.
And you did bring up earlier, you just mentioned earlier as an example of Shadowcraft too. And Shadowcraft, you use the Fate Core system as well, correct?
Yes, but we took a lot more liberties with the rules. I was a little more confident that I could mess with it and not break it. So, and then I would have fan buy-in. I was a little worried when I did Jadepunk, like, are the fans going to buy into this asset system? I think it's cool, but the Fate Fractal, maybe not. So I sold it on my blog, and I have a lot of articles that I wrote back then on the blog about that, trying to sell it. But so many people liked it and liked what we were doing in that space that I thought, okay, well, I'll do Shadowcraft, and we'll just go big, and we'll do all the different rules changes that we wanted to do, and try lots of things out.
Right. And so you're mentioning the blog that you have at like ryanmdanks.wordpress.com.
Yeah, that's the archive where it lives, because I closed it down about 4 or 5 years ago.
Right. Okay. And people can still, now that you've kind of recessed it up for people that want to look at that then.
Yeah, I took my blog down, but a lot of people were referencing some of my articles, because my older articles are big on Fate Core and rules changes and game concepts. Right. I kind of lost the through line of the blog eventually. I was talking about martial arts and all different kinds of stuff, and I just had fewer viewers, and so I decided, okay, maybe it's time to close. But so many people were like, hey, how do I access this? So I did the archive so that people who wanted it could get it.
And you also, I thought you had some of your Medium articles on Kindle Vella as well, correct?
I have Medium articles out there. So when COVID hit, it took my last job. When the kids went back to school but didn't go back to school, I had to quit my job in order to come home and help teach them. My wife was our breadwinner at the time, so made enough more than me that I had to be the one to come home. And so I needed something to do. I couldn't go to a regular job, so I started writing on Medium to try to make some money there. Made a little bit, did okay. And then, in the Medium, I started writing about writing a lot, about fiction writing, a little bit about game writing, but that's not really the audience for that. And so I started publishing that on Kindle, and took a blog post that was well received about writing and blew it up into something more, and then put that on Kindle so that people could access that.
Right. Wow. And so, and talk to us a bit about, as you mentioned earlier about that Shadowcraft, you said that you were able to make more liberties. You felt more confident making more liberties in some of the rules setting. What were some examples that you made that were very unique to Shadowcraft?
So Fate Core takes all of the skills and abilities and things of that nature that you would see in D&D, where you have the ability, the 6 abilities, and then your skills. They just compact them all into, here's your skills. And you have physique and how strong you are, and it's right next to fighting, how well you are at hitting things. So like everything is just skills. And then they have aspects, which are your character defining traits. And it was always felt odd to me that skills were very defined. And then aspects were like, you're a wavering wizard. And whatever you decide that means at the table, that's what you are. And when it's important, you spend a fate point and you get bonus to your roll. And I always thought that's really swingy, like really swingy to have next to these skills. Like it just feels odd. So then when Fate Accelerated came out, they still had the aspects, but they got rid of skills and instead they created approaches. Like if I'm going to do something sneaky, I get this bonus because I'm really good at sneaky stuff. But if I'm going to do something flashy, I'm not so good at that. And it was very broad concept, very abstract. And I thought this is getting closer, but it still feels like they're holding on to that skill a little hard. So what we did with Shadowcraft is we said, let's get rid of all of that and let's rank aspects. And let's say you're the wavering wizard. Well, you have like different bonuses. You have 5 aspects and you can apply them to different bonuses. Well, as the wavering wizard, you're +3 to that. And so when that matters, you roll a +3. But when it comes to maybe you have an aspect that says you are a social dilettante, but that's only a +1. You're more of a wavering wizard than you are good at being social. So then, so then we just go broad on that. And if nothing matters, if none of these things apply to you, then it's +0 or -1. I don't remember what we went to for the default, but there was a default that if none of these applied, then the default applied.
Okay.
And then that felt, it felt fun, it felt good, but it also has its limitations too, because if people go really specific on their aspects and they can't figure out how to make it apply, then there's a lot of default roles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So it does take some experience.
Okay. And did you see that because you made it a little bit more loose that it actually might have attracted a different RPG audience as compared to your Jadepunk game?
No, because what we realized with Jadepunk and everything that we were dealing with there was everyone was very big on rules. The Fate community was, especially at that time, was really big on how can the rules be manipulated, what can be done. And it was like all of the rules lawyers and YouTubers around D&D that's messing with here's how to do this build and that kind of thing. So they were going to take this mechanic and they were going to turn it and do something with it as well, we thought. So we were really speaking to the Fate audience with Shadowcraft.
Okay. And then so they were both then pretty well received with the Fate population then.
Yeah, I would say so. We had a great Kickstarter for back then. Now the Kickstarters are ridiculous, but back then you didn't see the kind of numbers you saw now, and so we were putting up really good numbers back then.
Right. So, well, Jadepunk, you made over $13,000, and then back in that time, that you're right, that was a huge number.
Well, we started at 7,500 was our goal, I think, and we did not expect to hit it. We were like, well, if we don't, Jadepunk, we were trying to just test the waters, and when we blew that out of the water in I think 4 or 5 days, and then we were like, wow. So we actually have to do this. But we did not expect it to be that. I think we rode on the coattails though, also a Fate Core. It did over 400,000. So, which was crazy for back then. Right.
And also what you do have you also have a lot of supplement books that came out with Jadepunk as well.
Yeah, so we with Jadepunk, it was my first project. I was getting my feet wet with project management and all of that kind of stuff. So with the stretch goals, we promised that we would do a few things, and we ran out of money, so we couldn't complete all of it.
Right.
But we did do. So one of the things we promised was a Jadetech book, and we were only going to make it one book. But then we got the idea that let's just do let's do 6 books. So we did 1 book for each color of jade, and then we did a book for the multi-tech jade, the multi-jade, and did all the colors. And then we did a little, the Vigilance Committee was a storyline, a little adventure that we were putting together using a little bit of the scene fractals and some other things. And then we started to play with the world and a few different other concepts in there, and that's where all those come from.
Right.
Trying to fulfill
And
the goals.
that's really interesting. You also had the latest one. You had Age of Anarchy came out, and that was that was not a fake core. That was a patron.
So I was trying to move away from fake core.
Right.
I just felt like I was done with it, a little bit burned
Right.
out. I've been playing it for 5 years, and I was just kind of done. And I had these ideas for a unique system for a really long time. So I was working with a guy named Paul at the time, and we were putting together this system that I was hoping to take into any genre. And he was a historian. I think he even worked out of a major college over in England. Like he was like taught history or something. And so he really loved the Age of Anarchy as a historical setting. And so this is a historical book, and everything written in it is written by a history professor. He's a super smart guy. And but yeah, I was trying to make a play of doing my own setting. This one was, or not my own setting, more my own system. This one though it's really hard to sell your own system, and this is where I learned that. So it's a lot of people backed it because of who I was or who Paul was, but it was just like, hey, you're a friend, so I'm going to support you, and that was really the support we got. So I would have liked to do stuff with it, but if it's not something that's already popular, then it's just not going to be received generally. Right.
So I'm very curious about it's called the Perpetual Motion Engine, the PME. Mm-hmm. Explain a little bit about what are the unique features of this system.
So what I had in mind was something like the conversation of Dungeon World and Apocalypse World, where I would set something up, you would respond, and then I would move and so I'm constantly moving the narrative around. But the mechanics don't necessarily do that. So I was trying to play with that. I came up with a system that I really liked. It was, there was an old 2D6 miniature game that I really dug. And I was trying to bring that mechanic out and trying to just play with that and add to it. But I think it worked out really well. Paul did a great job with the writing. It just didn't take off. And it was kind of the moment where I decided, maybe, I've got a family. Gaming was never really what I was gonna do. So it might be time to go back to writing. And then I got my work there got picked up into a professional career, and I became a project manager, and that was what started making me money in a more professional capacity.
Right. So that does bring up to the point as well, is that you also have some published works out as well. Some of them you have, previously you had Bushido, and you also had some Beginner's Guide to Martial Arts and some of the other ones that you put out previously as well. Mm-hmm. How is writing either like how-to books or some long prose fiction and just game design stuff? What do you tap into? Are you tapping into different aspects of your creative process for these things, or are they coming from the same well?
Well, like you said, the Renaissance element, I get involved in so many different things, and I have a bit of ADHD. So I'll dive all in on something for a really long time, and then I'll just abandon and come back to it later. And so I do have a lot of different skills, but when you're doing how-to books, it's the same thing as writing game design. It's the exact same thing.
Okay.
When I write game design, how do you play this game? And then when I write the Beginner's Guide to Martial Arts, as well, how do you find a school? How do you vet an instructor? So really it's the same thing, right? I'm going off of the same concepts, the same ideas of how to write. The writing's the same. But naturally writing about martial arts, a little bit different than writing about Wuxia warriors and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. And how does that compare to as well as some of your long form prose?
So the long form prose have been a perpetual work in progress. I don't have any published right now. Most of what I have published is short stories. I
Right.
do have a few things that I've been working on for quite a while that I'm trying to put out. I'm hoping to put out next year. But I don't. I accepted a long time ago that until the world finds this balance point of quality versus putting something out every 10 minutes, I'm not going to be a profitable writer because I can't do that a novel a month or a novel every 2 weeks because I don't have it in me. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. Jadepunk was the first and only time that I really said, let's just go and see what happens.
Right.
I've never been able to just do that really, except for then. So if I could do that on a novel and then it blows up, then I'll probably do it more. But at the moment, I just kind of have to put things out and have a regular job because I know that I'm not going to put anything out with enough regularity to make money.
No, you also bring up, it says, as a father right now, and we were talking before we went on the show about having with, do you feel as though as well as that your creativity also reflects the importance of spending time with your family as well? So is that all, like having the short stories seem to be more succinct as compared to doing something more longer as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. My kids they play tested all my games with me.
That's
I
awesome.
still, they're like, hey, let's play a role playing game. And I'm like, okay, you want to play D&D? Because I figured they've been hearing about it. They're like, let's play one of your games. Or why don't you write a game for us? So I'll just spend a half an hour writing up a little game and then we can play it. It's easy if you're just trying to do something quick and not be super deep. So we'll do stuff like that. But yeah, they've definitely helped me in that element, but also the ADHD element to it. I can write a short story in half an hour.
Right.
I didn't realize I was so fast at it, but my old boss was a writer and he challenged one day we were at Starbucks and he said, let's just write. Let's just sit down and write a short story. And I said, okay. And he started thinking and I was like, and he was like, oh my God. And then like 10, 20 minutes later, I was like, here, I'm done. And that was it. And that's when I realized, wow, I can do this in short sprints. But I have
Right.
a really hard time writing for 4 days, taking a weekend off, and then coming back and being interested.
Right.
So I kind of need those sprints. And I've been working on that.
And what would be your advice for somebody that's might be watching or listening to this that would say, Ryan, this is so amazing. You've done all this stuff. You've done some game design. You've created worlds out of your own imagination. Should I design a game first or start writing short stories to get myself out there?
Well, I would want to know what the goal is first. If you're
Right.
trying to make it money and be successful, there's a lot of places that talk heavily about that. I don't think gaming is the place. In fact, a lot of game designers are moonlighting right now as fiction writers because there's a way to make money in fiction writing if you're fast. So the places like Keystroke Medium, they're on Facebook and they have a website and stuff. They talk a lot about the business of writing. If money is what you're looking at, absolutely start writing short stories and putting things together and building and getting novels out there and putting it out there and just be fast. If that because that's the world right now is it doesn't even have to be great, it just has to be fast with really good art, always really good art, and then really good marketing. And then it can really suck and it'll still make some money. Unfortunately, and that's unfortunate for the industry. But if you're trying to just be expressive and find your place creatively and then grow from there, I would say whatever you're interested in most, do. Um, Jadepunk has, we didn't do it for Shadowcraft, but Jadepunk, I wanted to write fiction. So in between, at the beginning of every chapter, I wrote flash fiction.
Hmm.
And so I talked to our layout designer, Jesse Ferguson, and I said, hey, what, how many words can I fit on one page? And he told me what the word count was. And I said, okay, cool, that's my limit. And then every chapter, when I figured out what that chapter is going to be about, I wrote flash fiction that helped flesh out the setting, but also
Hmm.
let me be, you know, tell my fiction, tell my stories. So I think it's whatever you feel most into writing right now, do that. I think the secret sauce to it, if there's a secret sauce, and I didn't make this up, but so yeah, I took a master class from James Patterson, and I had found that I had already accidentally fallen into this, what he calls the secret to coming up with good characters and good settings, and that's take 2 or 3 things that don't go together, like Western gunslingers and martial arts warriors, and smash them together and see how you can make them fit.
Right.
And so, you know, he does it different, where you might take talking Disney animals and global warming and you know, climate change, and mash them together. And he wrote Zoo, those 2 kind of concepts, right? So when you take these 2 or 3 different things that don't go together, which for Jadepunk was Western gunslingers, Wuxia warriors, and Final Fantasy. I smashed those together because the Jade really acts a lot like materia from Final Fantasy. So I smashed them all together and said, here it is. This is the thing. And that's really it. Like, if you read a lot and and this is something Walt taught me, Walt Robillard, he's super smart guy, and very self-aware. And he said, if you read a lot, then you write fiction. Like, that's the thing. If you don't read a lot, you're just really interested in storytelling and in settings, then game design, because you don't read enough to have the words flowing through you really well.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow,
so
that's a really good. And so what about, so then would that be the equivalent also with Shadowcraft, where it was like basically like, you know, like Grimm fairy tales plus, you know, 007? Is that?
We actually put it right in the introduction, because I told them, look, this is our formula. So put it in there. So I'll read to you, because I have it right here. It says it's about 2 things: spies and fantasy, but Mission Impossible set in a fantasy world. That was it. That was the thing. And then when we came up with who are these people, these agents, the PCs, and we decided, when the old fairy tales were of changelings, where someone would take you as a baby and leave a fairy changeling creature in your place. Well, what happened to the baby when they're in the Fey world, when they're in Arcadia? What's their life like? And so that became the thing. That was the secret thing, where it's like, these characters are the lost ones. These are the ones that were taken as children, raised as slaves or companions of the Fae, and then the Fae have this massive falling out. And now these ones, like the Civil War, and now these guys have to be basically Mission Impossible agents.
Right.
And they all have kind of been changed by the world and have magical powers and such.
Now, I'm curious, as a writer and as a creative, is there a piece of you that kind of made Jadepunk and like Shadowcraft be in like a shared universe, or are they completely separate worlds altogether?
You know, all of my recent stuff, yes. The fiction stuff that I'm working on, I've got a superhero fiction and this vampire fiction, and then this dark fantasy, urban fantasy thing, and they're all in the same world, same rules, characters come and go, like a Marvel story. But no, Shadowcraft and Jadepunk does not. It's possible because you're in Arcadia, which is kind of like a demi-plane of existence. So it's possible that the babies were taken from Kaosao City, which is a Jadepunk. But you know, I never, until you mentioned it, I never even would have thought to think that about those 2.
That would be kind of like a 10th anniversary or some sort of anniversary, you know, game of just have like a hybrid adventure where you just put them both together. Yeah.
Jadecraft or Shadowpunk.
Yeah, see,
that would be cool.
That's so weird. Is Shadowpunk? If that's not a genre, then I don't understand why that hasn't been made yet.
Well, you know, when we were pushing, so RPG.com, is it? RPG.net, something like that. It was a really big forum back in the day. I don't know if people still go to it a lot, but back in the day, it was huge. And so we put our initial concepts of Jadepunk out there to see what people thought. And everyone, like, I remember that this one forum, everyone was talking trash. Like, you're just going to create your own genre. And I was like, well, that's not. I didn't. Punk is the genre. Jade is just my little, you know, thing on it, just like steampunk. That's punk was a thing, cyberpunk and all these other things. But yeah, I got made fun of initially, and I had to be like, you know what? I don't care. You're not my audience. Screw off.
I'm not making them for you anyway. So
Yeah,
they're like,
yeah. That's the hardest thing for a creator because we want everyone to love our stuff. Just like the game master at a table. You always want your players to like it, but sometimes you just have to be like, you know what? This table's not for you, and that's hard. It's really hard as a creative to get into that headspace of I got to find my tribe.
right, right. And now, is that term Jadepunk coined by you, or is that
I made it
predate
up.
you? Yeah.
I know that they. So I was watching recently. The Guild Wars 2 came out
Right.
with this. It's very recent. It was like this year, or last year. They came out with this like DLC, and it's not called Jadepunk, but they used the word Jadepunk to describe part of it.
Right.
And so, and it, if you look at it, it feels a lot like Cow City to some degree. So
Right.
in my mind, they read Jadepunk.
Right.
And I don't care. They can have it. But for people who have never seen it, like a very common thing, the show Arcane on Netflix
Right.
is it's League of Legends. I don't know which predates which, but my wife and I watched Arcane together. A friend of mine watched it and said I had to see it. And my wife was like, "Oh my God, this is Jadepunk." And I was like, "Yeah, it is. This is cool. I don't have to make an anime now. It's already there."
Right.
But yeah, it's I mean, because when you borrow these separate things and smash them together, naturally, I mean, the punk concept, Jade, they're all very common.
And do you need to have the Fate system, this Fate book, in order to play Jadepunk and Shadowcraft, or are they
Yeah.
standalone?
Jade Punk itself is standalone, Shadowcraft is standalone. In fact, they are different from the core. So if you have the core, it actually, like core is very big on stunts. Both of these books rewrite stunts.
Okay.
One, and Jade Punk uses professions instead of skills. So aristocrat is good at these things. So you roll your aristocrat rating for that.
Okay.
Fighter is good at these things. So you roll your fighter for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so it still very much keeps along the line of just like the spirit and intention of the Fate system as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. We were playing a lot, and Mike Olson wrote for Fate for years before we asked him to help us with this asset system. All the people who wrote on Shadowcraft were either already involved in Fate or were people that wrote for me for Jadepunk. Like Benjamin Feehan, we met through Jadepunk, and because he was a player of Jadepunk, and he posted his actual play online. And the way he described it, I was like, oh my gosh! Not only are you a good writer, but you understand Jadepunk better than I do. So I was like, dude, you've got to write for us. And he wrote some of the Jadepunk stuff for the supplements, and then he came in and he was the art director, and then did some writing for Shadowcraft.
Right. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, so we're getting to our hour mark now, Ryan. So, Ryan, if people want to follow you and learn more about your work and your upcoming projects, what would be the best place they could go to?
So I'm actually rebranding, like we discussed before we started the podcast.
Right.
I'm teaching martial arts and I'm working on that. So I have intrepidmartialarts.com. That's where ryanmdanks.com forwards to at this moment.
Okay.
But it's not going to be my home for nerd stuff. We're going to build this out as a pretty serious martial arts website. I got some other friends that are helping me that we're just going to put together our martial arts stuff. So that's what that's going to be. We have a thing around our gaming table where we give each other nicknames. And the nickname is based on what your class would be if you were a real person having a class, and then an adjective that describes you. And because of my ADHD and the fact that I know everything about whatever game we play, all of my friends call me the Wavering Wizard. So, so I'm actually branding that, and I have on YouTube right now. I'm the Wavering Wizard.
Okay.
I don't have a video up yet on the channel, but I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to do. I'm going to get the website going, and I'm going to start doing nerd stuff there, fiction stuff, and not going to hide the fact that I'm me, but I need to brand it separate for the internet because I am
Right.
going to be trying to make money on each one. So it's going to be clear that, hey, yeah, that's what Ryan's doing right now, but it's going to be
Right.
as the Wavering Wizard.
Okay,
Obviously,
cool.
my name's going to be on things, but yeah.
Yeah.
So right
Awesome.
now at this moment, if you wanted to follow to get an idea of like, hey, what are you going to be doing with social media and stuff for nerd stuff, I would say go to the YouTube channel, follow that. I'm just Wavering Wizard on YouTube, and
Okay.
then there's no videos. Like I said, I do have an Elden Ring video that I shot that I'm going to put up, but other than that, I'm going to start doing more RPG games, more fiction stuff, just all nerd stuff.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. And listen, when you have any of your new stuff come out, just come back on the show. I'd love to talk to you more about it.
Well, absolutely, I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time.
I know. So, is that something to? It's like just like being in Las Vegas. It's like I'm surprised you didn't have like a map of like Las Vegas or something.
Everyone that lives in Las Vegas hates Las Vegas, so we want to move. But every time I go somewhere else, Las Vegas is new. It was established less than 100 years ago, and it didn't
Right.
even start getting built up until really 50 years ago.
Right.
So every building and house that we have is more or less a couple
Brand new.
decades old.
Right.
So I go to another town, I see the wallpaper peeling and weird ceilings that fall like snow, and I'm like, this is old. I don't want to live here. So